Welcome to another episode of Indie Author Blueprint. I'm Michelle Rayburn, your host, and today we're unpacking a really important topic: why so many writers are walking away from traditional publishing and choosing the indie route instead. It's not about bitterness. It's not about giving up on the dream. It's about seeing the industry for what it really is in 2025 and making empowered choices. So let's talk about why traditional publishing is becoming less viable and why indie is rising. Grab your coffee or an adult beverage, I'm not judging, and let's get into it. Let's start with the big picture. You've heard of the big five publishers, right? Penguin Random House, HarperCollins, Simon & Schuster, Hachette, and Macmillan. Well, over the past few years, they've been trying to merge and consolidate even more. They were the big six before, and before that, they were the big seven. I don't know how many there were, but there have been more in the past, and they've been merging, and some of the imprints that are under those now were a separate imprint at one point. You'll see that a lot of the Christian publishers are under one of these. And they used to be standalone, for example. So the Penguin Random House and Simon Schuster merger was blocked by the courts because the industry is shrinking at the top. And this is a problem because fewer publishers means fewer book deals. The competition is fierce. You've probably seen this. And the most of the precious slots that are out there for books go to celebrity memoirs, political exposés, or guaranteed bestsellers in the fiction realm, the people who have been around for a while. Or you probably remember seeing a few months ago Prince Harry's memoir come out. And of course, that was a big one. Like, a publisher could sustain themselves for the entire year on that one book. So the competition is tighter because of this consolidation. So this means it's harder for us to get books published when nobody knows who we are, and we don't necessarily have a platform to sell a ton of books. Another thing is the risk aversion and cookie cutter publishing. So let's talk about that. Traditional publishers have become more and more risk averse. They're pouring their money into books that feel safe. So they are looking at sequels, remakes, stories that mirror what's already trending because they know it sells and they know people are going to buy more of that. So what if your book doesn't fit that mold? What if you have a genre mashup with a story that doesn't really have comps when you go looking? In indie publishing, those kinds of books thrive. Readers love these fresh, original content takes that break the formula. And as an indie author, we're the ones that get to deliver that. So we can take the risk. It doesn't matter if it's safe or if we know it's selling or trending. We can take the risk and we can blaze the trail ourselves. So the risk aversion is really real, and the cookie cutter thing is real because bottom line, those traditional publishers need to make money. Okay, let's talk about the third thing. This has to do with money as well. This is the shrinking advance and the reality of DIY marketing. Let's bust a myth really quick here. The glamorous idea of landing a huge advance and having a full marketing team behind you is a myth. It's increasingly rare. I know it happens because when I mentioned Prince Harry, I think he got like 20 million or something like that. Don't quote me because I don't know the actual amount, but it's rare. In fact, for debut authors, advances have been shrinking for even longer. And the idea that they would be over $10,000 is pretty much gone. Or if there are larger advances, it's paid out in chunks over a year or two. It's not just upfront. The marketing budgets are also separated. They're reserved for the top 1% of sales. So if you are with a publisher who has some really well-known writers and they're selling really well. The marketing money's going to go there and they're in the top, the cream of the crop. And so you're expected to hustle for your own audience, to run some of your own ads, manage your own social media. You don't have people doing that for you. So the myth, if you've heard people saying, I want to go traditional because they do it all for me, that is truly a myth. And so at that point, this is where we come down to the indie part where we say, why not do it myself and keep 70% of the royalties if I'm doing an ebook, and 40 to 60% of the royalties if I'm doing a print book. So that's the reality of it. The shrinking advance and this having to do the marketing on your own means that it's just not as appealing. Now, I know that that's still what some people want to pursue, and that's perfectly fine. All right, let's talk about another one. Technology. Indie author publishers are tech savvy and faster. So one of the biggest advantages for indie authors is we can be agile. While traditional publishers can take 12 to 18 months to bring a book to market, as an indie author, we can publish in months or even weeks, depending on if we have our whole team lined up. When I work with my clients who have me edit their books, do their cover, do their layout and their ebook, and then coach them on getting it on KDP, we do the whole process in around 6 to 8 weeks. And so they come to me with the book written. They've done that part. That part's all set. And I'm ready to edit. And I edit it. It goes back to them. While they're reviewing those edits, I'm working on the cover. And then I'm working on the interior. And in 6 to 8 weeks, their book is ready to go to market. Now, we take longer if they need that. But in reality, it could be even faster, depending on the turnaround time that an author has to devote to getting those edits reviewed and stuff. So platforms like Amazon KDP, Ingram Spark, Draft to Digital, they've made professional publishing accessible. You can do ebooks, paperbacks, hardcovers, even audiobooks. And most readers don't care who published your book as long as it's good. Period. That's it. You need to do it well. Don't take shortcuts. Don't write poorly. Don't write cookie cutter books that just sound like every romance novel that's out there. Take the time to be really good at the writing craft. Hire the right people to make your cover look great. Invest the money you need to, but don't overspend. You don't need to spend $10,000 to get your book published. And so when you do that, if you're tech savvy or you know how to connect with the people who are, you have that agility. You are able to get your book out there faster and in the hands of the readers. All right, now let's look at something related to immediate feedback, the power of real-time data. In traditional publishing, the decisions are still being made by acquisition boards, basically the gut feeling of the senior team, the editor, the person who just has a feeling this is going to sell, or what worked last year. But indie authors have some data at our fingertips that we can use from our own results. And so once you have a book out there, you can track the sales. You can try out a new cover. If it's not selling, you can test it out because it's print on demand. So you have this real-time data, because if you change out the cover, tweak the blurb on the back cover, run some ads, you might see some immediate results from what you're doing. And so you're making business decisions and you're really being business savvy, and you're taking this entrepreneurial approach. Now, in traditional publishing, they just can't match that. And there's a reason for that. With offset printing, they have to have it all set ahead of time. They are going to print boxes and boxes of books that get warehoused and distributed. And so they aren't able to do the guessing and changing and messing around with things a little bit. And so because of this power of real-time data, and if you pay attention to it, you can figure out what works for you and then really tweak that and hone that. Beyond Amazon, indie authors are also creating multiple income streams. And this is another reason why people are turning to indie publishing instead of traditional. There are new revenue streams and there are direct-to-reader relationships. For example, audiobooks can be done through ACX or Findaway or some other platforms. So there are multiple ways that an author can take their print content and distribute it and also have a potential for earning. They can sell direct. So maybe you're doing something non-traditional. You're not using Amazon or Ingram Spark. Maybe you're selling books on like Shopify or something like that. You're doing direct things, or maybe you're using Patreon, where you're selling, maybe it's a chapter at a time. There's so many creative things like Substack. This podcast is hosted on Substack. All of my content is there. There are subscription communities like Substack and Patreon where you could actually write and sell your content there. Now, these are side hustles for some, but they're primary income sources for others. Traditional publishers aren't able to flex as much with these direct-to-reader opportunities, so you would still have to do that separately as the author. So as an indie, we are thriving here because we can try all the things and still publish books or not publish books, publish our writing in different places and see some income coming from that. So that has changed. Perhaps your nonfiction book idea turned out to be better as a whole series on something like Substack, where you could build a community and then have that opportunity for people to pay if they want to be part of that community. All right, our last thing that we'll talk about here are success stories and the indie mindset. We all know names like Colleen Hoover, who started out as an indie, and there are other ones like her who started out and then got picked up, and then they had this loyal fan base, but they kept control of their rights because they're the writers of the content, but they've built these fan bases on their own. And now some people who started out indie are making big numbers because they own their careers. Now, I'm personally not in it for the big bucks. Generally, people who write in the genre and market that I do are not in it to make big bucks. Most have a speaking platform and it's just extra content to send home with their readers. And so that's more where I'm at. But the possibility is always there, especially if you're a fiction writer who wants to take the risk, publish it yourself, and get a following. I actually have chatted with a couple of other authors who started out, released a book independently, and then got picked up by a publisher and then got like a 3-book deal or something out of that. So it is possible. And so I never see anything as a dead end. I never look at it like this is the end of the road. I always say that I wouldn't want to be traditionally published because I really like being an indie author, but that doesn't mean an offer or something wouldn't come along someday that would make me think, yeah, maybe I should rethink my stance on this. So you're the CEO, you're the author of your own business. You get to call the shots, and that's the indie mindset that we have. So you think about that. Don't burn any bridges. The success story is always evolving and changing, and so we don't burn bridges. We always keep those open for what might be ahead. So here's my final thoughts. The traditional publishing path isn't dead, but it's narrowing, it's consolidating, and it's becoming harder to break into. Indie publishing is not a consolation prize. This may have felt that way in the past, but indie publishing is actually a strategic choice for authors who want creative freedom, better royalties, faster timelines, and real business control. The publishing power shift is here. The only question is, are you ready to step into it? I want to thank you today for hanging out with me on Indie Author Blueprint. If this episode sparked something for you, share it with a fellow writer who needs to hear it. If you've been thinking and sitting on the fence and you and another friend are thinking about being indie authors and you just needed a little inspiration, share this with a friend and then come back and comment because I do want to hear your story. So tell me, are you an indie author and what has your journey been like? Make sure you hit subscribe so you don't miss any episodes, and also be sure to check out the ones that are available for paid subscribers because you get a lot of bonuses with that. It's only $8 a month, so it's kind of like going out for coffee once. It's worth it if you are looking for some help and you don't want to pay a coach $100 an hour to sit down with you. I've put all the coaching here on Substack, so look for Indie Author Blueprint on Substack and you can subscribe there. Until next time, happy writing and happy exploring your indie author path.